Well, hello there, movie readers. Today I have some great news. Realising that I had nearly finished all of my Alan Dean Foster novelisations, I decided to take a little plunge and finish my collection. Well, at least the movie collection, anyway. So now I own all of his novelisations of films, including his novelisations of Shadowkeep and the LucasArts game The Dig. The only novelisations left for me to collect are the Star Trek logs, which were based on the TV cartoon. Foster is one of my favourite novelisation authors and is currently still the best in my opinion. It is clear that he puts in more time and effort than many of the other writers. He qualified from UCLA with a master's in screenwriting, so he knew his way around a screenplay and how to interpret them, which made him a natural choice for publishers. He sees novelisations as his own director's cut of the movie, and so tries to expand where he is allowed. He states that he never reads his own books. I wonder if other authors do this, because I seldom watch my own videos after posting them. So without further ado, I will take you through my collection in chronological order of when they were released. His first novelisation was Luana in 1974. This was an Italian-made movie, which Foster did not have a script to work with, because it was in Italian. So he wrote his own Tarzan story based on the Frank Franzetta painting which we see on this cover. This is a novelisation, therefore, of a painting rather than a screenplay. After Luana, the publisher's Bantam allowed him to write the Star Trek logbooks based on the TV cartoon series. His next movie novelisation was Darkstar. My copy here is a 1979 reprint, name-dropping Alien on the front cover to capitalise on the success of its screenwriter Dan O'Bannon. Foster struggled to write this as it was difficult to get 70,000 words from a bunch of bored characters on a spaceship. I believe this was his hardest one to write after the two video game novelisations that he did. After Darkstar, Foster wrote a novelisation for Maud's Dilemma. This manuscript, however, was never published, but can still be seen at the Hayden Library of the Arizona State University. A couple of years later, Lady Luck smiled upon Foster. His editor at Del Rey called to say that she had bought the rights to a film by George Lucas. Star Wars went on to be his most famous, successful novelisation which he ghost-wrote for George Lucas. Foster is on record for being happy with this arrangement. He also mentions that Lucas is the nicest man that he ever met. He even got a tour of the studio during the filming by John Dykstra, and also an opportunity to speak to George Lucas. The first edition of this is pretty rare and expensive. There are multiple editions available. This one is by Sphere Books of London, with some colour photos inside. In 2020, Foster would then have a dispute with Disney for not issuing royalties on the e-book sales of this, and also the subsequent Alien novelisations. The matter was resolved in May 2021 with Disney arranging for payment for Foster, James Caan and Donald Glut for their work on the sequel novels. Next up, it's Alien in 1979. I have covered this in a separate video. After the success of a previous novelisation of Star Wars and Darkstar, he was the natural choice for Alien. He had only 6 weeks to write this, with no description of the final alien. This one is one of my favourite novelisations. The build-up to the hatching scene is more enjoyable in this book. The dialogue of the screenplay is well written, with many extra conversations of how they can and can't trap the alien. As you can see, I have since found a nicer copy than my old battered Warner book, and found the Futura illustrated edition in my local Oxfam. This copy has colour stills from the movie. It also includes a still from a deleted scene of the crew's failed attempt to trap the alien. Next I have Black Hole, Disney's attempt to cash in on the space opera after Star Wars. Foster had to correct some idiotic bad science in this novel as best as he could. In fact, he had made a list of 75 things that needed to be changed. He considers The Black Hole to be one of his worst novelisations for those reasons. From then on, he discovered filmmakers do not like other writers nosing around on their work. This edition by New English Library has some nice colour inserts. Next up, I have Outlander 1981, directed by Peter Hyam. This one's in nice condition. I need to re-watch this movie. Foster describes this film as high noon in space. There was some more bad science in this screenplay, but Foster was learning that directors do not care and they're just after that great enjoyable shot or scene. This is a nice Sphere Books edition, No colour, but we do have black and white stills instead, which is fine. Next, it's the Clash of the Titans, in 1981 also. This was a recent find that spurred me to finish the collection, when I realised I only had a few more to go. So off I went. Whilst writing this novelisation, Foster got a chance to correct some little bits of Greek mythology that the screenwriters got wrong. Futura publications again, but this time with some colour stills, and some of them look quite good. The cover art is also by Dan Guzzi. And now we arrive at The Thing in 1982. This was the last piece of my novelisation collection puzzle. This is the magnificent The Thing from John Carpenter. I have been coveting this book for some time, but the ridiculous prices online put me off. Whilst I did not pay like the typical £30 price tag, I did come fairly close. Too close. And here it is. No colour inserts, sadly, or thrills, just the book. This book is based on an earlier Bill Lancaster script, which was altered during the filming, therefore it has a slightly different ending to what we got in the film. Next, it's 1983 and it's Krull. This was a very fun film when I was a kid, but Foster is actually rather scathing of this movie. I guess when you're a writer and you're an adult, you will naturally have a different view of it when you look back. Foster pointed out to the producers that you shouldn't mix fantasy and science fiction, such as swords and laser spears. This is the UK Corgi Books version, complete with black and white photos from the film. It was during the year 1984 Alan Dean Foster had around about 9 books published. He realised he was doing a bit too much, and afterwards vowed to reduce his output. So in 1984, Foster returns for another John Carpenter film, this time Starman. After the horror of The Thing, he decided to change tack and go for a love story. A story with a very human emotions, which I suspect many non-sci-fi fans could also enjoy. Away from all the flashy effects and action, this story was actually a joy for Foster to write. This one is the Corgi Books edition. Next up, it's The Last Starfighter, a novelisation I have covered in a separate video. Sadly, no photo inserts in this edition. Foster stated that he enjoyed writing the scenes of ordinary people at the trailer park. He states that the writer Jonathan Betcherell did a good job of making you care for the characters and not needing to invent emotions for them in the book because it was all there in the screenplay. Next, it's Pale Rider for 1985. I found this copy in an antiques collectibles shop and was surprised to find it, as I was unaware of its existence at the time, plus it was cheap. Another change for Foster, this time trying out for the western genre. I have not seen this movie, but after reading the back of it, I think I want to now. Next, it's Aliens in 1986. I've covered this in a separate video. This one must be one of Foster's best-selling novelisations, along with Alien, Star Wars aside of course. Foster found novelisation this screenplay easy compared to the predecessor Alien. There was plenty of action to fall back on, plus he knew what the aliens looked like this time round. What shocked him the most though was after the publishing, he found out that Futura had removed all the swearing, without informing him, because naturally he would object. No doubt the publisher knew that this would be read by young teens. Well, they were definitely right there. We did read this a lot. And do you get the feeling that Alan likes an alien story yet? Now it's on to Alien Nation in 1988, a rather interesting film that begat a TV series. I suspect that this movie was also an inspiration for District 9 and Bright. Foster stated that this was a screenplay of many missed opportunities due to the lack of detail on the alien culture. I've not seen this film since I was a teen, but I remember it as being an interesting reluctant buddy cop film. Next up, it's Alien 3 in 1992. Yes, I have found a suitable replacement copy for my battered one. This one was an easy purchase online for peanuts. I've covered this video in a separate one, if you want further detail. Needless to say that Alan Dean Foster hated this movie and immediately tried to rewrite the novel so that Newt and Hicks survive. Producer Walter Hill set him straight, and after that we got this half effort from Foster, some 20 pages shorter than it could have been. Sadly, his heart just wasn't in it to do a faithful adaptation of what he was given, depriving fans of this movie of a first-class novelisation, but still a satisfying read based on the better version of what was actually of the theatrical release. After a long hiatus of film novelisations, no doubt scarred by Alien 3, Alan Dean Foster returns for the Chronicles of Riddick in 2004. Foster even got to appear as an extra in this, which is where he was able to cause some on-set mischief. He got to speak to Vin Diesel about the characters, causing Diesel to go back to the director with his head full of Foster's ideas. This led to a major bust-up between the actor and the director David Toy. Next, it's Transformers in 2007. This film I partly enjoyed, mostly for the visuals of actually watching a car turn into a robot. The book offers some extra observations, and Foster again got a chance to write from the point of view of an alien civilization. No colour stills or anything like that in this edition. Next up, it's Terminator Salvation in 2009, McGee's misfired sequel. Alan Dean Foster irons out some of the plot holes in this. This book is another example of studios removing the finale twist from the novelisation. Instead, Alan Dean Foster had to rewrite the book in a few days due to studio changes. And now on to Star Trek 2009, Foster's first return to the Star Trek universe since writing the Star Trek logs and writing the story treatment to the 1979 The Motion Picture. He was initially denied access to the script by Paramount, which would have made his job a little difficult. Even then, they thought he could just have a little glance at it and then be on his way. Eventually, he was allowed his own copy after signing his life away should it go missing. He enjoyed writing about the characters and their new younger versions. As you can see here, this is a slightly larger format and again, no pictures. Next up, it's Transformers Revenge of the Fallen in 2009. This film was awful. I was hoping the studio would build on some of the lore of the Transformers, but what we got was just more dumb action. Alan Dean Foster, though, jumped at the chance to write a sequel, as it gave him the opportunity to write more about alien robots, something he enjoys. Next, I have Star Trek Into Darkness. This is another larger format paperback. Foster did not have to beg this time for the screenplay, and even got to see a rough cut of the film, aiding his descriptive writing of what things look like. Technology had now advanced to this point to allow Foster to view the movie whilst it was in production, via the internet using his own home computer. This meant that he could pause and rewind scenes, making a better job of writing it, and it also made it far easier. Now, it does leave me wondering if this viewing ability for writers has what's led to many novelisations being near carbon copies of their film counterparts. This is something I've noticed over the last decade, and this is probably the reason why. Now it's 2015, and Foster got to return to the world of Star Wars with The Force Awakens. He had some creative freedom with this one, such as the scene at the beginning with Leia alone, thinking of Luke. Foster wanted to include more, but the executives had to cut him short, such as he wanted to add more about Snoke. But he had to cut down on what he wrote because executives were worried about canon, and having to follow up in the sequel anything that was written in this novelisation. And it didn't matter because they kill off Lord Snoke anyway in a silly, shoulder-shrugging kind of way. Lastly, we have Alien Covenant in 2017. A terrible film, but for Foster, probably not a terrible advance on the book. He returns to the Alien franchise for the first time since Alien 3, to a right stinker of a movie. He didn't know this until he'd signed the contract and they gave him the screenplay, featuring a crew of clowns. This book is by Titan Books, the biggest kid on the block at the moment for novelisations. So I think it's fair to say that Foster has had a fantastic career in writing novelisations, as well as being an accomplished writer of his own original books. He managed to get his name put on a lot of cult classic films. During this time of writing novelisations and speaking to filmmakers and publishers, he made a bit of a name for himself as a troublemaker, asking hard questions regarding the science or logic of the story, and saying what he thinks when people ask. He views his novelisation work as a collaboration with screenwriters to achieve the best adaptation of their work. He has stated that he will write more novelisation should he get approached. He is now 76 years old and hopefully still writing. And that is it for my collection. I do not honestly think I'll ever get around to getting the Star Trek logs because they're just too pricey at the moment. Don't forget to like and comment, and also let us know which one was your favourite film or book. I hope you enjoyed looking at my collection as much as I did, and you can let us know which one was your favourite cover or story, and if you intend on planning to add any of these to your collection. Thank you very much, and goodbye.